Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hi everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2614 of The Tom Woods Show, and I've just returned from being away for a week on the Tom Woods cruise, and aboard that cruise we released our episode with the great Clifton Duncan, which we recorded on the water. But while we were gone, a lot happened in the U.S., in particular that 5 minutes of confrontational talk with Zelensky and Trump and Vance, and which made me realize I would have no choice but to talk about this as soon as we return to land. And joining us to talk about that and other things is our old friend Daniel McAdams, who is executive director of the outstanding Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. He's also the co-host of the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Daniel, as Dr. Paul would say, Daniel, good to see you.
Good to see you, Tom. Thanks for inviting me back.
Okay, so by now everybody has weighed in and commented on this, but that doesn't mean I can't still do it, because there's more to be said than about just what transpired there. But I will get ahead of myself a little bit and say, and this may shock you, Daniel, but I am actually pleasantly surprised by Marco Rubio, in that if you give him an assignment and you say, you are going to carry out this particular program of mine, and that is all you're going to do, apparently he's pretty good at that. He's not very good at coming up with his own stuff, but if you tell him, go do this and be a bulldog about it, he actually can. I mean, I think he's actually acquitted himself pretty well on the Sunday talk shows and such.
I agree, and I'm surprised. I mean, I was devastated, near suicidal, when I heard that he was going to be the Secretary of State. I thought it would be a disaster. But he's actually not much of a freelancer at all. He's certainly no Mike Pompeo, that's for sure. And so, yeah, so far I'm pleasantly surprised. Maybe he was just bored in the Senate. I mean, he probably had that seat for life. Probably wasn't that exciting. He gets to travel. He gets to, I mean, everyone likes a change of scenery. Some people take cruises, and some people go out and
some people become Secretary of State,
or weed their garden like I'm about to do. So everyone needs a little bit of excitement in their lives.
Well, yeah, because he was on This Week on ABC, and he basically put it this way: look, we should be happy we have a president who pursues peace rather than war. And if this were a Democrat, they'd be calling for him to win the Nobel Peace Prize. He said, I can't understand why there's this outsized kind of reaction to it, other than his name is Donald J. Trump. And he said, look, this is the situation. I mean, this is where we are. And I mean, it boils down really to this. And I don't see what more there can be to say about it. There is no path to victory for Ukraine. That can't happen. That's not going to happen. And we're dealing with a nuclear power. So that's a fact. So unless we are going to be cavalier about the possible end of the world, we have to figure out some way to talk this through. Or the alternative is you could just continue to kill Ukrainians forever. Ukrainians could just go on dying until there aren't any left. Or you do what Trump is trying to do, which is to say, shut up already, and let's see what we can salvage out of this mess everybody has made.
Yeah, I mean, Trump could announce free cookies and milk for everyone, and they would flip out over it, They would hate the idea. So, yeah, Trump has his own style. It drives him crazy. Oftentimes, Tom, it drives me crazy because I'm not used to it. Sometimes it's funny, it's entertaining. Sometimes I don't get it. And there's a lot to this deal with Ukraine I frankly do not get. And I think a lot of it is pretty dumb. We can talk about it if you like later. But absolutely, the fact that he simply picked up a phone and talked to Vladimir Putin to bring us back from the brink of war. I mean, on what earth, on what planet is that a bad thing? It just doesn't compute.
Right. But of course, the response is, well, you know what the response is. And in fact, we'll get to that in a minute. But let's say a particular word, though, about, I haven't come up with a very good name for it. I on Twitter, I called them the libertarian movement's CIA wing. And people didn't quite get what I meant, but I think the people who follow the movement know what I meant, which is there is a group of people in our world generally who can be relied upon to take the CIA line on whatever foreign policy matter you're talking about. And with Ukraine, and I include in this, by the way, a huge number of European and Eastern European, quote unquote, classical liberals who have been god awful and hysterical on this from the very beginning. Can't have a conversation about it. They call you all kinds of names, and you're in the pocket of the Russian regime or whatever it is. You see, there's no point even talking to these people. But you know who I'm talking about. These are spooks and creeps who have been around the movement for years and years and years, and they've just been thrown for a loop because U.S. foreign policy never really changes, as you know, Daniel. It changes marginally. It changes cosmetically, but it never really changes. It basically follows whatever the worst bipartisan consensus is. That's what just happens reflexively. But suddenly something different is happening, and it has caught these people completely off guard.
Yeah, I mean, libertarian spooks, I would also say libertarian Trotskyites, I love liberty so much, I'm going to push it on everyone else or else. I mean, these are the people who cheered Juan Guaido. These are people who cheered the fake CIA revolutions in Iran, et cetera, et cetera. The fact of the matter is there is no universalism with regard to political philosophy. Some countries, there's not an inevitability of the triumph of liberal democracy around the world. Fukuyama's been proven wrong over and over again. Some countries may arrive at a different destination with regard to their political orientation. Iran may want to remain more or less a theocracy. The same may be true in Saudi Arabia. For us as libertarians, as non-interventionists, we should say that's fine. Just leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. We'll sell you some stuff. We'll buy some stuff from you. Everyone's happy, but they can't handle that. They can't stand that. They want everyone to be just like us, and it never will happen. And it's a recipe. It's a recipe for war and mayhem, and it just doesn't work. They're always wrong.
But some of them are trying to in effect take what has now become the Zelensky line, which is if you don't fight him now, you'll be fighting him later, which. We're not actually going to be literally fighting the Russians, but the other more reasonable version of that line is that after Ukraine, then comes Poland, and then the Nikki Haley version of that line is, well, as Putin himself said, he's going after Poland and then these other countries next. Now, of course, she assumes no one's going to check. He never said that, but so I have a wager with somebody. I mean, I realize this is probably in bad taste, but I'm just sick and tired of people making these crazy predictions. I mean, I was on my second trip to Iceland. We were this time with the family, and we were taking a tour. The tour guide was telling us how comforting it was for her because we saw some American troops walking by, and she said how comforted she is because this is going to protect them from Putin. And I thought, your frozen rock is of no interest to him. This is not even remotely. I mean, it's like they're all suffering from a derangement. So, but what about that? Well, if he gets his way in Ukraine, then the Soviet Empire is going to be resumed.
Next time we meet, we'll be eating blini together.
Yes.
It's crazy. What the hell does he want with Poland? Why would he want a country of, 20-some million people who hate his guts? Like, on what planet is that a smart idea? Here's an idea. I have the largest country on earth. I have the richest natural resources of any country on earth. I'm developing intellectual resources, infrastructure, constantly. My GDP is growing. So why on earth would I want to invade a Poland that can't stand me, that hates my guts? Why on earth would I want to march through the Champs-Élysées? Why would I want to go to Berlin past the Brandenburg Gate? It is so, it's not that long ago, Tom, that we laughed at the domino theory because it was so dumb and so insane that it's a joke. It was a joke of the Red Scare. And now it's been resurrected by these people, and it just makes no sense. You don't even have to think that Putin is a great guy or a good guy or a smart guy. But it just makes no sense for him to take Poland or little old Iceland. We don't have any rocks here in Russia. We don't have any geysers. We don't have any snow. We got to take it over there. It's just on its face. It's just so goofy.
Hey, everybody, you know how much I was paying for health insurance for my kids and me, not including my wife, who had a separate policy? Over $3,000 a month. $3,000 a month. Well, you know what? We're not doing that anymore. Now, listen to me. You've just got to put your foot down. There's absolutely no way you're pleased with your health insurance policy, or certainly since you're paying for it. So I urge you to do what the Woods family does. Restore sanity to your health care with Crowd Health. It's not health insurance, but that's a good thing. It's a better way to pay for health care through crowdfunding. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. And it's fantastic. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months. Go to joincrowdhealth.com and use code WOODS. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. And don't forget code WOODS. Well, talk to me about your problems with what the presumed arrangement is. Can I assume you're talking about the minerals agreement?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's insane. Certainly the way Waltz has described it, he was on the shows over the weekend or whatever. First of all, okay, I don't know why Trump is negotiating anything with Zelensky. Zelensky is on the absolute edge of losing a war. He's 3 feet away from losing a war. He will lose his country. He will lose power. Anything that's signed may as well be signed into the wind or what have you. Why are you having a discussion with this person? Why are you making a deal with this person? Why are you? This is what Waltz said. He said Zelensky was so close to a great deal that will tie our two countries together for a generation. Well, why the heck would you want to tie our country in with the most notoriously corrupt country on earth for a generation? Talk about an entangling alliance. I don't understand the deal. The deal makes no sense. The minerals we're talking about are now literally under the control of the Russians. They're all in the east. There's a little bit in Kiev, as I understand, but they're not going to start digging mines underneath, the government there in Kiev. They don't really have anything to sign away. Why would you want to entangle yourself? Why are we involved in the negotiations whatsoever? Why is Trump trying to make a peace deal? I don't understand it. Now, I like the fact that he's talking to Putin. I like the fact that we're talking about repairing relations with Russia, which I think could be enormously profitable for both countries. Trade is always, it always sort of rises all the ships together. But this idea, I mean, the way Waltz described it and the way Trump himself described it is as follows. We make a deal for minerals with Ukraine. We give them more weapons. We send our companies over there to dig up these minerals, and Putin doesn't dare continue the war because there's an American with a shovel digging up some rare earths. That makes no sense at all. It's just as explained by Trump and Waltz, it's a dumb move. There's nothing to it. Unless it's some sort of a bargaining chip or 4D chess, it doesn't make any sense. He's best to walk away. He's best to do what he said he would do, especially after what happened on Friday in the White House. He's best just to say, okay, you guys aren't ready for Zelensky. You're not ready for peace. You said it yourself in your own words. We're going to lie back and see what happens. And in the meantime, he'll be overthrown. It'll happen, and then there'll be someone that they can negotiate with that also at least has some democratic legitimacy that Zelensky himself does not have.
Now, when you say he'll be overthrown, are you saying that the atmosphere in Ukraine is one of we need to talk now? I don't know how we can rely on or whether we can rely on opinion polling or anything, or do we have anecdotal evidence? How do we know what the state of opinion is there?
Well, it's tough because he's outlawed all the opposition parties. That makes it a little bit rough, and all the opposition newspapers, and the Russian language and what have you. So it's difficult to know. When Trump, he said he has about a 4% approval rating, he came back and said, no, that's not true. It's 57%. Well, it turns out the guy who did the polling was his good buddy who was funded by USAID. So yeah, that's a big problem that you have. But, we have seen anecdotal evidence that there's a lot of frustration within Ukraine. There are a lot of people that are sick of his leadership. And when they see the tide is turning, how does bankruptcy and revolutions happen slowly at first and then quickly? I remember the fall of the Berlin Wall, as do you, Tom. I couldn't believe what was happening. It happened so quickly, Yeah, in June, a few campers decided to stay in Hungary from East Germany. They didn't go back when they were supposed to, and that opened the floodgates. And this pretty soon, within 6 months, the wall was gone. So these things happen very quickly. And Zelensky is not popular in Ukraine. I think that's pretty obvious if you look at the numbers, look at just some objective factors. So the problem would have a way of taking care of itself. The U.S. being involved in trying to make a deal, in getting ourselves more entangled. We'll take out your minerals and we'll give you security guarantees. And the security guarantees end up being Americans over there digging for minerals. That just sounds like a bad deal all around.
What do you make of the European response? I mean, in the UK, they've just gone berserk and making promises, and it doesn't seem like these are not the fighting sort, most of these leaders over there. So I wonder if there's anything to the bluster.
So you're telling me that Sir Keir Starmer doesn't have you shaking in your boots?
No,
you're trying to tell me.
I mean, this guy, everything about this guy's priorities is upside down.
I've been told he can put together an army of 20,000 people, Tom. So literally, that's what they're talking about, fielding.
But Daniel, this is an unusual situation for them, right? I mean, normally they and the U.S. go into some adventure together. Whatever the disastrous thing is, they're all in it together. This is a highly unusual situation.
Yeah, I mean, it was comical. After Zelensky blew it, hey, JD. No, it's Mr. Vice President, or it's Vice President Vance. It's not JD. That's what set things going on Friday. But after the disaster in the Oval Office, he slinked off to the UK for a meeting with Starmer, and then Starmer had his big press conference, 2 massive Union Jacks to each side of him, and he said, "We're ready to put boots on the ground and planes in the air." And then he went on, and about 15 seconds later, provided there's heavy U.S. involvement. I mean, that's like, me and you going into a bar, Tom, and I challenge the biggest guy to a fight, and I say, as long as Tom does the fighting. It's absurd. I mean,
yeah, no, I guess that's where things stand. But I mean, it looks like Zelensky has gone over there and is trying to see what he can put together. But without U.S. involvement, what can that really amount to?
Well, they don't have the economy to sustain it. The public opinion is clearly turning in the opposite direction. Now, you haven't seen a dramatic turn in the recent German elections, but if people who look at German, political behavior, the rise of the AfD in Germany, the entire east of Germany voting for the AfD, that's something that's much more dramatic than people understand. If you think about the past behaviors of the German voter, but you see places like Romania and elsewhere, Austria, Croatia, whenever there's a leader standing up and saying, this is enough, we've had enough of this, we don't want to have war with Russia, that person is elected. Now, sometimes they have to cancel the elections, as in the case with Romania, in the name of democracy. Nevertheless, the people are speaking, but they don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the financial ability. They don't have the ability to manufacture these weapons. And they don't, I mean, even if they had the money to buy them from the US, we can't manufacture these weapons in sufficient quantity that Ukraine would need to actually fight Russia. And even if we could, they do not have the manpower for this war. Even with Keir Starmer's 20,000 British troops, they do not have the ability to defeat the 3 million men or however many million men that are in the Russian army right now.
So here's what I want you to do, and this might be a challenge. Can you try to steelman the argument right now in 2025 for continuing the status quo? Because the status quo would just be the U.S. keeps supplying the weapons. Now, Zelensky wants more than that. But let's suppose Democrats were perfectly happy with the status quo for several years, so we just continue that. What's the best argument that can be made for that? What is the hope here? Like what think of the smartest person on the other side of this argument. What's that person saying?
Well, what they would say, the people on the other end of the argument, they would say that this could be the demise of NATO. If NATO is incapable of addressing a conflict of this size in its own backyard, then it's incapable of carrying out the missions that it was created for. To which you and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Tom, you and I would say that sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, you're not putting words in my mouth. That's fine.
That's a good reason to end it. That's the thing. Our credibility is on the line. If we let Russia get away with this, then all of our credibility is shot. To which I would say, who is this we? Because I certainly did not put my credibility on the line. In fact, you, Tom, I know, among others, back in 2014, were saying, why are we overthrowing this government? This will lead to no good. This is not little Gaddafi. This is not Panama, Manuel Noriega. This is a kind of a big country. So why are we doing this? Why are we overthrowing this country and putting them at loggerheads with their next door neighbor, Russia? So it's not my credibility on that. It's not your credibility on the line. It's the people who are always wrong, Tom. The Beltway foreign policy experts who are always wrong with their think tank sinecures, who more often than not come directly from the weapons manufacturers themselves, whose credibility is on the line.
Hey everybody, it's Old Woods here to de-bamboozle you. We've been brainwashed into believing the only way to grow our money for retirement is to risk it in the stock market. Not true. You can reach your financial goals and dreams without taking any unnecessary risks. Bank on Yourself is the proven retirement plan alternative that lets you bypass Wall Street, beat the banks at their own game, and take control of your financial future. What does that look like? Well, guaranteed predictable growth and retirement income with no luck, skill, or guesswork required. Your plan doesn't go backward when the markets tumble. Both your principal and growth are locked in. Tax-free retirement income. You'll know what your tax rate will be in retirement. 0 under current tax law, which protects you from the coming tax tsunami. And you're in control. You get access to your money for any purpose with no questions asked and no government penalties or restrictions on how much income you can take or when you can take it. Can't do that with a 401k or IRA. You can get a free report with all the details on how the Bank on Yourself strategy adds guarantees, predictability, and control to your financial plan. Just go to bankonyourself.com/woods. That's bankonyourself.com/woods. Well, as long as you brought up NATO, why don't we spend a little time on that subject? NATO obviously goes back to the late 40s and is a relic of the Soviet era. And it was the kind of thing that you could have imagined would be dissolved when the Soviet Union was dissolved, and it wasn't. And I think if we had it to do over again, we would be less naive about the possibility of it being dissolved. It really is true. I mean, Milton Friedman meant it domestically when he said there's no such thing as, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. Well, same thing in foreign policy. So that had to find another rationale. And so it was looking, it had, maybe it was going to be China, maybe it was going to be Islamic terrorism. Now it's Russia. There's always some reason for it to be hanging around. But in practice, it seems to me as if what it really does is either provoke conflicts or make them worse or intervene where intervention is not called for. If you had to assess the record of NATO, let's say post-1991, how would you do it?
Well, remember, it was going to be the drug war at first. We've got a new mission. We're going to help fight the drug war.
Oh, I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, that's true. And then, around 91, they glommed onto Gulf War I. Now, they weren't the center of that, but they were definitely involved, and they were hoping that they could expand their area of operations to the Middle East in Gulf War I. And then, of course, later in the mid-90s, it became the war in Yugoslavia, and they decided that bombing Serbia was a great idea. That would be, and actually, Dr. Paul wrote about it this week in his column. I encourage people to have a look at it. We're going to be a human rights organization. We're going to bomb the crap out of you if we decide that you are bad on human rights. And that's the case. But, Tom, I was in Hungary in the early to mid 90s, well, throughout the entire 1990s. And I was very involved in Hungarian politics and in politics in general at the time. And I remember very, very well, I was working for a think tank that was associated with the current ruling party of Viktor Orban, Fidesz. And I remember very early on, and I was working at the newspaper, when NATO expansion to the early three was being discussed, you would not believe, Tom, the arrivals in town of Lockheed Martin, of Boeing, of all the big defense contractors. And let me tell you, they were throwing cash around like you would not believe. They were putting on spreads for everyone in the Hungarian military establishment, the lavish spreads. Remember, these people were not particularly well paid under communism, right? They had a lot of perks, but they weren't well paid. Here comes Daddy Warbucks. Augustine was from Lockheed, but all of these guys came in. They threw their money around like drunken sailors, and that's how they got the expansion to really be ramped up. This was a money-making thing for NATO, because NATO was in bed with the military contractors, and that was the whole purpose of this expansion in the first place. Without a second to pause and consider the consequences if we keep expanding NATO to Russia's doorstep. And this is where Trump gets it right. Who's not going to be upset about it? Who wouldn't be? He makes a great point about that. So they didn't care. It was about $1. It was about a lot of bucks, and that's what they did.
Now that you mentioned Hungary, I want to say something about Hungary. So I've been reading in the news about the Hungarian government, I guess, or Orban himself, have been pretty favorable toward Trump, already, but also in this situation, as the other European leaders have huffed and puffed and shared with everyone their moral superiority on the matter, he's taken rather a different tack on the question.
And surprisingly, Robert Fico in Slovakia as well, who started out as kind of a globalist leftist, and who, like Orban himself, has evolved into being more of a nationalist populist type of politician. You know, when Orban first hit the scene in the late 80s and early 90s, he was actually Soros-backed, and he was considered the great liberal hope of Hungary against these horrible nationalists and conservatives who might win elections again. They won the first elections, the anti-communists did. They didn't want to have that happen again. So Soros and a lot of people backed Orban. And to his credit, as I would say to any politician who realizes that the path they're on is not a productive path and changes tack, to his credit, he did change significantly. And when he was elected in 98, he went from being a liberal to being what they would call a polgári, which is more of a civic government, so center-right kind of government. And from there, faced with the refugee crisis in Europe, where everyone but Hungary opened their doors, and now they're a disaster, and Hungary said no. That's how he became more populist. Hungary for Hungarians. We don't want to take in a bunch of people who aren't going to really add anything to our society. So he has evolved in that sense to be more of a populist conservative, as has Robert Fico, and has a whole new generation of Georgescu in Romania is singing the same tune, as are even some people in places like France and Germany with AfD. So you are seeing a lot of changes, and Orban, again, to his credit, has turned into a real world leader. And I think in Trump, he's found kind of a kindred spirit. They share a lot of things in common. And it's ironic for me, who remembers Viktor Orban, when it was, to be honest, it's an inconsequential country, to be honest. It's a small country without a lot of influence. Remembers that little Hungary, and then seeing Viktor Orban on the world scene, talking to Trump, being a friend of Trump, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I was wondering actually what it was that was unique about Hungary, and that maybe your experience there might have given you some insight into it, that would have yielded the kind of government they have, somebody like an Orban, as opposed to, let's say, Poland, because you could say Poland was supposed to be like a quote unquote conservative Catholic country. I mean, I don't think John Paul II was a conservative, and I know you agree with me, but that's another episode. That's a more interesting episode that you and I could have, Daniel. But I don't think they've had any governments that have been particularly outstanding or noteworthy, but yet here we have in Hungary, they're willing to buck the trend. And I was wondering what factors might have contributed to that unique situation.
And you can't say history, because yes, Poland has a very difficult history with Russia. There's no question about it. But so is Hungary. I mean, every time, I don't even just date back to 1848. I mean, you can go back to, I'm sure if the Hungarians were with us right now, they would be, talking 1600s or earlier. But basically, every time the Hungarians had an uprising against the Austrians in the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, when the Austrians were getting their butts kicked, as usually happened, they would whistle and the Russians would come to put down the Hungarians and kick them in the face a few times. And it happened all the way up until 1956 when the same thing happened. It wasn't the Austrians who called them, but it was the Russians who came in and put down the 56 revolution. They put down the 48 revolution against Austria, which it's a long story, but it ended up in more of a liberal, equal partnership in the Austro-Hungarian dual monarchy. But nevertheless, so the Russians have always been there, annoying Hungary. But Viktor Orban, I don't remember the exact quote, but he said something to the effect of, we need to put our history behind us and work together as much as possible for the future and for peace. And I don't think Poland is psychologically capable of doing that. Now, maybe, and I'm not an expert, I'm not a psychologist, what have you, maybe it has to do with the shifting borders of Poland throughout history. And now Hungary lost a lot of territory, 2/3 of its territory after World War I, which was a national tragedy. Still, the heart of Hungary in the Carpathian Basin has remained. And so that is the homeland. So there hasn't been the shift of the core like there has been with Poland. I don't know. I'm just taking a guess here, Tom.
Well, let's take a brief, let's go on a brief tangent here and say a little something about your upcoming conference, because this will be of interest even if the time has passed. I think the kind of theme that you're covering is of lasting importance. So you have a conference coming up in Lake Jackson, Texas, a place most of us had never heard of before, but now we hear Lake Jackson, Texas, and it instantly brings a smile to the face because we know it's Ron Paul's town, and the Ron Paul Institute is having an event. I guess it's March 22nd?
Yes, indeed. And we have one of my very favorite people that are going to join us. His name is Tom Woods.
How about that?
But it's, you know how it is, Tom. I mean, the people there's a group of people who absolutely hate Trump no matter what he does. And there's a group of people who absolutely love Trump no matter what he does. And so our thankless task is to try to sort through that and to take a look. And the conference is called America in the Age of Trump 2.0. And so we're going to try to sift out the good, the bad, and the ugly. And thankfully, a lot of people who would listen to the Tom Woods Show and the Liberty Report, they understand that we're not on rah-rah for Team A or Team B. We want to look at, in the context of the principles. And so that's why I think, in my opinion, we brought together a great group of people who are uniquely capable of doing that. We have one of my favorite commentators on the scene, Tom Woods himself will be there. David Stockman, he's on the board of the Ron Paul Institute, an amazing former congressman, former Reagan OMB director, prolific writer. This guy can write 6,000 words in about 3 seconds. He's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know how he does.
Intellect. Amazing intellect. Yeah. His facility with foreign policy and economics and the nexus between the two is amazing. I mentioned Jeff Deist, former Representative John Duncan Jr., one of the famous 6 Republicans who voted against the Iraq War. That's a really unique group of people back in 2002, at the end of 2002.
He was the last one of them to resign, actually, to leave Congress.
The last one of them to leave. And the man himself, Ron Paul. I might be saying a couple of words myself, but it's just going to be a great time, a great get together. And yeah, Lake Jackson is not necessarily a tourist destination, but in March, there's a lot of cool stuff to do down here. There really is. There's a lot of nice stuff if you want to stay for a day or something.
Well, I am very much looking forward to it. Every time, the fact that we still get to see Ron Paul out there, is tremendous. Nobody would have begrudged him a quiet retirement, I always say, but he refuses to take it. He wants to be out there in the arena, still spreading the message. And so what a wonderful opportunity to meet a lot of like-minded people, learn a few things, have some nice fellowship, and a wonderful day together. So what is there an easy link? Like maybe I could create an easy link or something to it.
Yeah, I'll send you an easy link, Tom. And I would say, if you don't mind, to your listeners, I would like to put out a special deal to Tom Woods people. I would like to do a discount code Woods. It's all you need to know, and we'll give you a good discount. Take advantage of the fact that you are making yourself more intelligent by listening to Tom Woods every day. So why don't you save a couple of bucks in the process?
Yeah. You're making yourself wealthier and smarter. So
that's right.
So that is great.
Right.
Okay, coupon code Woods. I had somebody on the cruise this week say to me, just to be safe, I always try coupon code Woods on every product and service, just on the off chance that Tom has some kind of an arrangement with them. So, all right. So I think what I want to do after you and I finish recording this is I'll create a link, tomwoods.com/Lake Jackson.
Okay.
Obviously all one word. We know you don't put a space in a URL, but tomwoods.com/Lake Jackson. That'll redirect you to get tickets for this. And don't forget coupon code Woods. So this is about, I think the Ron Paulian link to where we are today is a very interesting theme to explore, because I think a lot of the good things that we see today have their roots in the Ron Paul revolution. And the bad things we see mean that the revolution still has a ways to go. But there's no doubt that Dr. Paul took ideas that no one was thinking about, or that they didn't dare utter, like maybe we shouldn't have gone into Iraq or something, and made them suddenly topics of legitimate discussion. Now, not everyone was ready for that. Not everyone was ready. But years down the road, all of a sudden, wait a minute, apparently they are ready. Now, whether or not they're going to acknowledge that the guy who brought us these ideas is this one you spurned, I don't know. Some people have been gracious about it, some not. What did you think about Roger Stone proposing Ron Paul for the Presidential Medal of Freedom? But now, of course, in doing so, he's building his mailing list, because you have to register your name on the petition. But he could have done that with anybody. Why did he pick Ron Paul? So that's interesting.
And Roger's a nice guy, and people will attack me and say, "Oh, he's an SOP or whatever." I'm sure there are plenty of things I don't agree with him on. But I think he's got a good heart, and I think he really means it, and he's going to build up his list a little bit. That's okay, because he said it on.
I'm the last person on earth to complain about somebody building an email list.
But he doesn't have to. But he says it on programs, and I don't want to be specific, but he is following up, and he through his people that he has with him have reached out to us for a couple of things that I don't want to talk about right now. But yeah, I think he definitely does, and I think it's a great time. And he mentioned Dr. Paul and Pat Buchanan. I would love to see the two of them. No one has heard from Pat, and I have to fear the worst, that he's really not getting out very much. But it would be beautiful to see both of them get it. But I wanted to say, Tom, as you were saying that, I was looking down, and I wasn't being rude, because I wanted to call up something based on what you're saying, the Ron Paulian origins of where we are today. Because I just got a text from a friend of mine who works for Nicole Shanahan, who I have a lot of admiration for. Now, she just posted this on X. She said, quote, "Ron Paul was light years ahead of the curve. While others succumbed to the military-industrial complex and neocon foreign policy, Dr. Paul never wavered. He was America first before it was mainstream. Loved seeing President Trump channel the wisdom of a true legend." So ironically, that's literally what you were just saying. And it's wonderful to hear coming from someone who I believe has a great future and is going in a great direction. And that's Nicole Shanahan.
Yeah, and I have to admit, it's funny. We talked about Roger Stone just a moment ago, and he said maybe a few weeks ago, I misjudged her at the very beginning, and I said some things about her that were unkind that I retract. But she really does seem like a genuine person who has a lot of good intentions and good ideas. And it's funny, I could say exactly every single word of that, and it would be true for me also. That's how I have felt.
Yeah, I mean, when we arrived to an event that we went to, and I won't be specific, but as soon as we got to the hotel room, I got a text, and we had no contact with her, and it was that Nicole Shannon would like to come talk with Dr. Paul for a few minutes, and they were both going to go on stage, and I was, of course, because I'm trying to help make sure Dr. Paul gets where he needs to go, slightly annoyed and wondering what was going on, because I didn't have a great impression. I'll be honest with you. A young, attractive woman who becomes fabulously wealthy by marrying an extremely wealthy person. There can't be a lot of brains there, But she came up to the suite that we had, and she and Dr. Paul sat down and started talking, and I was from a discreet distance, listening as closely as I could. And it was shocking. She came with this farewell speech. She quoted it in detail without opening the book, and she was just very moved by the things that Dr. Paul had been saying. And they had probably talked for about an hour, I think, something like that. And as she walked out of the room, both Dr. Paul and I looked at each other like, wow, this is really incredible. So I also need to eat humble pie from my first thoughts about her. I think she's amazing.
Yeah, and it could well be that she could have had an evolution like all of us have had. You know, I mean, I'm not exactly the same person I was 30 years ago or something. So that's certainly possible. And I really do feel like, especially, I get more sentimental, I suppose, and maybe a little bit more of a softie as I get older. And I do feel like, people deserve second chances, because I have gotten to know and met and worked with and enjoyed conversations with people maybe 15 years ago I wouldn't have wanted to, but look, they're good now, and that's what matters, where you are now and where you're headed. So this is going to be an exciting event, and my own remarks are in fact going to talk about kind of a theme that I more or less mentioned a minute ago. I am going to try to trace out a little bit explicitly the influence of the Ron Paul revolution, because I don't know if you've encountered this, Daniel, but we have a lot of let's say, congenitally black-pilled people who, even when we have a win, they just can't take it. They don't know how to accept a win. So the win has to be secretly a loss. Mm-hmm. And usually the win is a loss in ways that only they have figured out. And like, we are too naive and stupid. We don't have the unique insights that they have to know that we're never going to win, and any win is an illusion. And I mean, that just wears you down. And that's not a universe I want to inhabit. And we have had some wins. And one of those wins is that Ron Paul's message did not fall on deaf ears. Now, we know that from the days of the thing itself, but it continued to ring down the years. I mean, there was something happening. There was something happening at that time. Like, there were people who had been apathetic, who were suddenly awakened. There was something happening. There was an energy that you didn't see in the campaigns for Duncan Hunter or Tommy Thompson or Tim Pawlenty or any of the others you don't even remember anymore, and nobody will remember. I mean, Tim Pawlenty and Tommy Thompson were governors of, more or less major states, and no one even remembers them anymore. And yet this congressman from Texas, who stood alone and voted no over and over and over, and who just stood his ground and then retired, it was the words he said that echoed down the years. So I want to talk about that, because we did do something. In those presidential campaigns, it wasn't like they were without mistakes or that we wouldn't have changed certain things we'd had to do over, but we did something that the fruits of which we didn't fully comprehend until years later. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about at that event.
You got me sold. Where do I get my tickets?
Well, as a matter of fact, I have a convenient link, tomwoods.com/Lake Jackson, using coupon code Woods.
Well, not to be sacrilegious, but some of that good seed fell into fertile ground and produced fruits 50-fold. Which was our gospel a couple of weeks ago at Mass. And that is the truth with truth tellers like Ron Paul, and that is what happened. And people do look back on it. You're talking about the congenitally black-pilled people. People will say, "Oh, Elon Musk is such a scumbag," whatever. I don't care. He has retweeted Ron Paul probably more than he's retweeted any other politician that I know of, and it's responsible. He said things like, he said something yesterday that Keynes is a disaster or something. I mean, he is retweeting Ron Paul constantly. He's getting people interested and excited about Ron Paul's ideas. Why am I going to try to swallow a black pill and say somehow this is a loss? This is a huge plus. He is reinvigorating all the people who were involved in those campaigns, the great people who were involved. They feel optimistic again, and I think that's a terrific thing.
Yes, because I think it's funny how these swings occur, because after 2022, when the so-called red wave didn't materialize, a lot of people, myself included, were discouraged. And again, not that the 2022 Republican Party was necessarily something to write home about, but I felt that in principle, those terrible COVID governors needed to be unseated, just in principle, that could not be allowed to stand. And it was allowed to stand. And it was just demoralizing to me. And not so much because of the politicians, because of the people, that the people thought, I'm going to vote for that. That's what I want. I'm going to vote for this destructive, idiotic, low IQ, horrible set of policies. I'm going to vote for that. And so I know some people who said, well, that's it. I give up. I mean, there's no point. If people can't even see that, what's the point in even bothering? And yet here we are 2.5 years later, and suddenly there's a complete change in tone. Now, it's not naive. People, sensible people don't think the problems have been solved, but they feel like a corner has been turned, that there are possibilities that didn't exist before. Ideas that were dormant have become live again. And, maybe we make something of this moment, maybe we don't. But we are in this moment, and I say make the most of it.
People are talking about non-interventionism, that used to be a fringe idea. People are talking about audit the Fed, in ways that has never been done. Elon Musk is saying audit the Fed, there was a big wave of it during the campaigns, but as you say, it kind of went dormant, and now people are talking about these things. So, how is it a loss? Even just what happened on Friday, we know that Trump and Vance are not perfect on foreign policy, and they have some very large blind spots that probably most of your viewers understand. But nevertheless, contrast a J.D. Vance sitting next to his president, berating a foreign leader coming in and acting like an absolute lout. Do we think that Trump's previous vice president would have been doing that? He would have been on the other side. Pence would have been on the other side. And Trump would have never allowed him because he knew the guy was a loser. And so, yes, I feel a little white-pilled about J.D. Vance because he's smart. If you've seen him argue on X, he doesn't just put up a middle finger. He'll give you 5 or 6 paragraphs, very well thought out. Now, I hope he comes our way on some other areas, but wow, we've got a young, smart vice president who I think hopefully represents the future of the party, because it is skeptical about the thing that I have spent my life working on, which is we should not have a global U.S. military empire. So, yeah, we all get discouraged, but there's a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And now for the most ham-handed segue of all. One thing to be thankful for is the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, which does really great work and is hosting an outstanding conference I will be speaking at, but it's coming up really soon, so make sure and get your discounted tickets at tomwoods.com/Lake Jackson using code WOODS. Daniel McAdams, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Tom.
And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to pay for books anymore. Just go to tomsfreebooks.com. You'll have more reading material than you know what to do with. See you next time.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.